Good. Good morning. This is October 29th, 2021, Alaska version 3. Thank you all for joining this morning. The agenda is in your chat here in just a second. Sorry, I thought I had that ready, but I didn't. Copy. There's the agenda. It's the same usual one, but it's there to make it handy. Today we had, in addition to just some introductions and just going around the horn to see what's exciting, wanted to primarily focus in on the retreat that we had last weekend and go over what happened as well as what was developed at that retreat, and maybe begin talking about next steps in that process. Also got a few announcements to go over. There's a lot happening in the next couple of weeks, so I want to make sure folks are aware of and taking advantage of in that area. So as we go around for introductions and any thoughts on what's happening in the world that is kind of pointing the way towards what's next in Alaska. If you have any agenda items, let me know at the same time as you're doing the introduction, and I'll try and add them in here. We'll probably have a lot to cover in an hour, so we'll just jump in and see how this goes. Oscar, the beginning format, I think everyone else has been here before. We generally, as far as the introduction, and since this is the first time you've been here, I think, for a while, or at least on this one, just to give us a little extra about kind of your background and what brings you here today. But generally what we're looking for in this first discussion is something that you've seen in the last week that has been kind of an aha in terms of where the world is going, and more particularly where maybe some insights about discussions about Alaska's future and where Alaska is going. So we're just kind of watching for little things going on that might help inform us. And generally it's been the catalyst for some of the other projects that we've ended up doing by taking note of what's happening. So at any rate, Kitty, if you want to kick it off, and then it'll be Laura after that.
Good morning. Well, I've seen a lot of you guys because of the retreat and a little bit of chatting since then. So that's what's new, is being as engaged in this. And I guess reflected on it with my daughter last night. Excitedly introduced her to Margie because of her work in regenerative tourism and what Margie's doing. And so that was exciting. But in the process, I found myself reflecting with my daughter, Courtney, how I feel as though for most of my Alaskan professional years, I've been thinking about helping to catalyze a network of networks. And a lot of different ways and ideas, I mean, a lot. And it feels more real with you all right now than it ever has. So I remain excited about this. So that's kind of my takeaway. Something feels really tangibly valuable that we can offer.
Cool. Thanks, Laura, and then Ryan.
Well, I saved this card that I got in the mail, and you don't need to know, you don't need to see it, but I'll just tell you this. I don't know if this is a sign of our future or if I just find it interesting.
Yeah.
So I got, and I guess I wonder if any of you know this person. I got this little postcard, and it says on it, Women's Small Business Month, happy October. And the company is, there's a picture of two people or one person, I cannot tell. There's two photos of 4 Alaskan women business owners, and the company is called Audax Wealth Management. Kai, anybody heard of them? Anyway.
No.
What really struck me about this postcard is I was like, I couldn't figure it out. Is it a conference? Is it a group? Is it a individual advertising their own business? It turns out to be the latter. On it, it says, finally figured out. There's so many typos on here, by the way. It says, finally figure out how to generate a profit, save for retirement, separate personal and business. The one that I really zeroed in on is at the bottom, it says your fractional CFO.
That's funny.
Now, this person does not know how to do marketing because the QR code she's included here is not at all usable. But I guess the reason it struck me, and something someday I'd love to follow up with you, Kai, on, is does it really raises the question of what is our community providing in terms of executive fractional leadership, and can we cultivate it in state? I am personally convinced that it is very little non-existent here right now. And I just thought, wow, one person got the memo. She didn't do the memo right, but she got the memo. So that's my little ad.
Fascinating with your journey on trying to find a fractional CFO, and then this thing shows up in the mail. It's kind of some divine algorithm out there that's listening to you, and you've made it onto somebody's list at this point. And at the same time, somehow you made it onto the list. Somebody's now trying to pick your pocket for your wealth.
I will say that we are really enjoying this fractional CFO person we're working with, and I hope word gets out a little bit that this is a solution that people can tap into.
Yeah, I think it's that's a good thing. I put the link in the chat for folks that are interested in this. I'm wondering if your fractional CFO gave your name away or something too, but we'll take it from there. Good. Hey, Ryan, and then Elijah, you'll be after Ryan.
Hey, good morning, everyone. The trend that I have been noticing this week, I've kind of had two things that have been resonating with me. One of them is the concept that Kitty introduced me to of artifact creation. And it struck me this morning that the artifact creation in meetings is essentially what I have been trying to do through my creative process, as I would go and hike and then take pictures and then want to create music and edit the pictures in the video and then create a painting from it. And it's essentially trying to capture and distill and then share an experience to carry forward into the future. But I hadn't translated that for some reason into the business world. And so it's been like this merger of two parts of myself, which has been really enjoyable. The other thing that has been really resonating with me is just sort of the energy that is in the air right now. Oscar and I had a conversation on, what was that, Tuesday evening, I was going for a walk and we're, talking on the phone, and there's just a lot of thinking that has been going into how do we create an intentional community in Alaska? How do we connect people? How do we facilitate that sharing and that resourcing of the people who are up here? And I really appreciate that. And then I had a chance to continue that conversation a little bit with Rebecca, who started to throw some pretty cool events at the Seed Lab. If you guys get a chance, check it out. Last night there was some ambient music and video that went along with it. And it was a full playing of a record, which I haven't sat down and listened to a full album in a bit. And so that was fantastic. And then there was video to go along with it. And so that was a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to seeing what other stuff she whips up. But there's just a lot of cool stuff happening right now, and I'm excited about it.
Thanks. Elijah, and then we'll be around to Bradley.
Yeah, pretty same old same. Crypto. The community stuff, I've kind of wrapping my head around that. These social tokens and community tokens. That's a new thing that's happening that might be a way to bring communities together to kind of incentivize and participate. But still, like I said, just kind of yelling to the forest out here. No one seems to be biting on the crypto. That's fine. I got to reach out different avenues, I guess. And then skiing, just enjoying some blue snow and some Hatcher's Pass. Been really good. Might head up after this. Anyway, that's about it.
Cool, thanks. Bradley, and then Pasquale.
Hey, good morning, all. Not as engaged this week, I think, with broader strokes of society than I usually am. I'm coordinating with a researcher in California to get our Air Force grant in line with the deadlines. But had a really interesting campfire meeting yesterday with 2 members of Launch Alaska's cohort, and one of its mentors. Had an interesting conversation about what early stage companies need, especially before getting funding, and still kind of getting my notes together on that, but hopefully that discussion will continue over Startup Week. We'll have some more kind of around the fire in-person events, and yeah, really like interested in kind of flipping the traditional way of top down, where we sort of get together as an ecosystem and figure out what we need to shower down, and instead kind of make a more coherent list of asks from those in the community that don't have access to capital, don't have access to political power, and maybe don't have access to the right kind of first employees. So anyway, that's what I've got going on this week, and then preparing for the big panel. Kai, really grateful that you stepped up and are going to represent the Alaska ecosystem in that, or the startup community, with the Norwegian consulate bringing in people from Norway to kind of kick off Startup Week. So looking forward to that.
Thanks. Just as a quick note, there's going to be a meeting Wednesday morning that I think Margo and CED are doing to look at startup ecosystem programs. That's going to be a little bit more of your top-down type of discussion, but it is going to be trying to look at what's going on and maybe try and think about some gaps. And it's going to be kind of bookended then with the other session that we're doing on Friday that's going to look at some of the Build Back Better initiatives. So there's some pieces of the puzzle. I don't think it's going to get to exactly where I see us needing to go with what you're referring to, but I do think the week is going to elicit some good conversations, but I think more importantly, we're going to have to think about how to create the forum to go that next step that you're talking about. Because I don't think we'll get there next week, but I think we'll do a lot to jiggle the system. But somehow we got to figure out how to capture this stuff and find a path forward on it. Pasquale, and then to Oscar after that.
Hey, good morning, everybody. A few things that this week I found interesting, but I would like to move a little bit forward with the agenda that we have. I'm expecting it's going to be pretty dense, and so far it's just world ideas that may or may not apply here. I think they will, but I'm also pretty sure higher ups are aware of that and will be taken care of. So I'm gonna pass to the next person.
And just a shout out to Pasquale. He's gotten the domain email started for us so that some work coming up here can start coming to the AKV3 domain. So he's spending a while yesterday helping out with that, and I appreciate him jumping into that suddenly to create that capacity. Oscar, and then will be Rebecca after that.
Hey, I guess I think I understand the format. This week, I stumbled across the notes on AKV3 after the phone call with Ryan. And Bradley's been kind of exploring something that I've been exploring for at least the last year as well, which is sort of taking what are like more privatized, like estate planning models like trusts, and turning them into collective equity models around community. And this is a big interest to me because my background is actually in photography, and that's just my nature is that to explore things. And I discovered that in Alaska, informal institutions like communities actually have a lot of power because they bring incredible access and just a different way of doing things. It's kind of like a culture first approach versus like a framework for an institution leading. And so that kind of ties into what I've been up to for the last month, which is a few internet friends and I on Reddit started a community that has a social token. I've been in crypto since like 2015, and it's been hard to explain to people what it's like to live in two worlds, one that's immediate and accessible and one that's kind of like permissioned. But I'm curious to see how that world merges in with this one, because I'm now working at this new co-working space that's actually run by Brenna. It's the co-work by RSD. And it turns out even here, they're wanting to create a community first culture. And they're even trying to design a loyalty program that creates incentives within the community to kind of collaborate. So that's the meeting that follows after this for me. But that's me in a nutshell.
That's great. And Oscar, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of back up half a step in terms of you've been around in the community for a while. I don't know if everybody kind of knows kind of your background and some of the projects you've been on. If you just kind of give us a little more context about what you've been up to.
Okay. Yeah, I guess most recently, so I think most of my community is kind of in the art community, the creative community. So with the fundraiser for the Anchorage Community Works, the warehouse, that is now the space launch company. I'm not sure what it is, but that location, I created a network of artists, or met them, and then we started experimenting with different like social revenue models. And then that ended up manifesting into Aquila Space, which is the gallery on 6 that I run with a few friends. And then I just kind of have taken my learnings from both those environments and started moving it to a virtual world. And that's a new place I'm kind of hanging out, but yeah.
Cool. Thanks for joining us today and sharing that. I think you began to open my eyes to another world at this point, and I'm excited to learn more about that. I don't know what to do with it yet, but it's there. Let's see, Rebecca, and then I think we're over to Andy to finish up.
Good morning, everybody. Just keeping my video off because my internet's having a bad day, I guess. I honestly have been kind of in the weeds with a lot of museum stuff going on. We're switching over a number of exhibitions, which is exciting, and helping with that. So I haven't really been working on too many other big things, but Seed Lab, yeah, just like it was nice to see Ryan there last night. We have a lot of ideas for some big and little things. So honestly, if you have ideas for something that might even use the space, let me know. But we did, I think I mentioned that futures literacy workshop a while back about envisioning future and kind of and collectively working through that. We've picked a date with the UNESCO facilitators. So December 2nd, it'd be like 10 to noon on a Thursday morning virtually. So when we have that link created, I'll let you all know, but I feel like that's pertinent to this group. But otherwise, I am just excited to hear about what came about from the retreat.
Nice. Thanks. And then Andy, it's good to see you here. I know you've been buried and trying to keep your head above water. I hope you're doing well. I'm curious what you've been up to.
I have been up to absolutely nothing because I've been sick since last week.
Oh no.
So, and I'm still trying to get over it. So I'm just here to listen and hear how the last weekend went, and hopefully start to try to reconnect with you guys, because I feel like I've been so disconnected lately. So the only way to reconnect is to reconnect. So that's why I'm here.
Well, thanks for joining us today. I hope you are feeling better soon. So just a couple quick things from me without getting into the weeds of too much of the last week, because that's the retreat stuff. I just want to make sure folks are aware that we've got the Alaska Startup Week that starts, essentially it starts with that World Affairs Council meeting at Friday morning. We've got a startup weekend going on next weekend, November 5, 6, 7. That's starting Friday evening and going through the weekend. Still looking for participants for that, as well as help with the coaching and potentially for folks that have been through the startup weekend before, guides for the teams to help them navigate the virtual process of getting through a traditional startup weekend type of format. And then a really busy week coming together with the statewide startup weekend. I'll put the link in here just so it's handy for you for startup week. I'm not sure where we're at right now. I think there's probably 40 or 50 events going on through the week. And it's a nice combination of some open houses and just getting in to see entrepreneurs and meeting them, some broader training type of activities, as well as a couple of these meetings. I'm hoping to peel back a few more layers of the onion on our ecosystem and a path ahead on that, including that Wednesday morning discussion that's going to be looking at the capability and the programs that are currently in place. And then Friday, the discussion about the proposals that came out from the Build Back Better grant process that I think provides a framework to look at potentially viable projects that have been proposed to be done in the next 4 years that have the intent of creating a 20-year impact on the trajectory of our state with a focus on equity, sustainability, climate change, pandemic recovery. I think all things that are at least thinking in the right direction, and we want to bring visibility to that. So I'm helping sponsor that event and working with some of the others. So there's more information if anybody is interested in that. You can connect up to through that link, or just get a hold of me. I'd be happy to connect you up with more information on that. Yeah, so let's dive into the retreat. I'm sorry, I'm just getting back on my notes here in the agenda for the meeting. I'm going to share my screen, I think. If I've got the right file queued up here. And walk you through a little bit about this. These notes put together by Kitty with, I think, help from Ryan and Pasquale. There we go. There we go. Slide rendering on your side. Cool, thanks. So the retreat that we had this past weekend was graciously hosted out in Girdwood at Kitty's family's treehouse. And it literally is a beautiful place up in the trees on the side of the hill near the ski areas, and was a wonderful place to spend the weekend. It was a bit wet. I don't think we spent as much time around the fire as we might have, but it was still a great opportunity. It's a nice space that was there. We spent the time really kind of, I think, weaving in between discussions about our interests and some of our ways of seeing some of the ideas we were talking about and interacting with the ideas, as well as developing some more information and, I would say, some clarity on where we're going next. I know I had a few big ahas in the process. And I think we continued to see a wealth of what we could do in the future, and we still need to do some work trying to distill that into a more concrete form of what we should do. I'll try and go through a few of those items that we looked at to give you a framework on that. We started off with some information that Margie had provided that provided some principles for working together and about building new systems that break down some of the traditional colonial patriarchal type structures. And we actually had, I think, a really useful discussion on that Friday evening that explored a lot of some of the underlying values that I think we all bring into this work and our interest in doing something kind of bigger than ourselves as we look ahead to what the community could be. And to me, this is a really interesting, challenging area, because it is truly hard, I think, to engage people long-term on doing things that are bigger themselves and not necessarily of immediate impact today, tomorrow. And a lot of what we're talking about is how to think about and how to engage and how to grow individually, grow as an organization, and grow the community, looking at things that aren't immediate, that are out there a long ways. They're not the type of paths that can be clearly seen. They're a bit opaque, and it's only until you start walking the path that you begin to see the opportunities, which is a lot of what we've seen in the 10 or 11 months of this work, is that we've had these conversations, and out of them have sparked ideas and opportunities, and we've pursued those, and we've taken another step down this journey of being able to discern something bigger that we could create. And I have this trust that if we continue down this path, that we'll begin to be able to do more complex things, and we'll be able to do things that have greater impact in what we're doing. It's a formula that follows what's been done in other parts of the country to help transform areas. And I'm excited about the process. I added on here a couple notes in this discussion we had Friday night that I thought were interesting. And to me, they came up and resonated multiple times for the rest of the weekend. And that was this notion of, as we looked at these principles, about recognizing that while these principles are ones that build respect and build community, build trust, we also want to be looking for what we can do that's bold, that is going to make a big difference. It's going to be engaging and purposeful, valuable for the time and energy that we could put into it. And so trying to create this juxtaposition between the intent of community and working together, developing a more harmonious way of communicating and working, but on the other hand, still leaving room for a bold idea, maybe somebody who comes forward with something that wants to work on something, being able to support them and stepping into that opportunity. So that led us, I think, at some point into this notion of some of the polarization that we're trying to change the trajectory of. And I thought it was a really good discussion we had around recognizing the value of providing a forum and a process that creates a creative tension around some of the challenges that we have ahead versus the destructive polarization. And it was with this recognition that there are some hard problems ahead of us. And I think one of our roles, and we'll see this coming up in the next couple of slides, is to maybe help find the space where the different ways of seeing our challenges can be held up and brought into an area where the tensions that may exist between different perspectives can be creative and healthy, rather than an environment where they become destructive and hurtful to relationships. So that discussion then that evening I thought was really good. I don't know, I'll pause for a second to see if anybody who was there wants to reflect any more on that discussion Friday and kind of that principles and some of the groundwork that we laid that night. Cool. Okay, thanks. I'm sorry, I'm having wheel problems here. So that naturally leads into this model that Kitty was bringing forward, and it's reflective of this way of looking at sometimes what began as kind of a look at different alternative ways of looking at systems, patriarchal versus matriarchal, but in this case it was framed in terms of the version 1 economy versus the version 2. And this idea of trying to build something that's an and from them, rather than trying to paint one as old and no longer relevant and another one as extractive and bad, but rather to recognize that they each have value, they both still exist, they both will have value in the future. And this approach at looking in this can be a way of trying to think about how we build on the values of each of these areas to create what's next, and not think of it in terms of replacing it. And for me, it was a huge aha. If you've seen some of the images that I've used for conveying V3, Alaska version 3, it has suggested that there was this sequential way of looking at going from version 1 subsistence to version 2 resource development to version 3 being some new value added type of opportunity. And rather than seeing them as sequential, I realized the way to look at it was to recognize that this new economic era that we want to create in Alaska really sweeps through the best of the subsistence economy and preserves it, protects it, and even enhances it so that it's viable, as well as cutting across the best of what's been happening with resource development, where that's been good. It's created jobs, it's created economic activity, it's strengthened our civic systems. And from those then building on to a trajectory for the next the next era for Alaska's economy. So that discussion, I think, led into a simple, but for me, really important aha in terms of looking ahead.
Hi, can I offer something in there?
Please.
So back up one, because I realize it's not there. So the idea is that in each of our systems, there's incredibly valuable attributes, and that would be in the upper half of that diagram on both the subsistence and the resource development world. And so you could populate this with what really are those most positive attributes that we all value. That said, there are parts of those systems that aren't fully successful, or they're doing damage, or they just aren't reaching far enough or taking us far enough. And so if you overdo one side of one of these economies at the expense of the other, you don't end up with the best. And so the idea is the power of the and, bringing the best. And this is where it reframed Kai's sort of 3 paradigm picture into taking the peaks, taking the tops of each paradigm and system, and creatively linking and leveraging those for whatever comes next in terms of a regenerative version 3. And what are the actionable practices that advance those better results, but what are the red flags that tell us that we're doing damage in any way? So that's a way of explaining that map a little bit more.
Thanks.
Something that popped out during this part of the conversation for me was the importance of finding common language, and that sometimes we have a term that gets used, but maybe it gets interpreted or gets heard differently by different groups. And so just the more explicit that we can be about the traits or the characteristics of these economies, the more successful we will be, and then pulling forward the positive ones that we want to bring forward.
Nice. Welcome, Margie. I see you just popped on here. We actually, we're going over some slides from the retreat, and we had actually just spent a moment going through some of the principles that you had brought into the retreat last week. So we're just getting into looking at some of the work that we did in the quad area and some of the examples there. So
awesome, thank you.
You bet. So most of the time on Saturday really got into exploring what could we do. And we had a pretty long navel gaze, I think, Saturday morning. I'm trying to remember kind of exactly how we got there, but we had a pretty deep conversation going on Saturday morning, and finally one of the folks said, "Okay, this is good, but are we going someplace?" And whatnot. And from there, we kind of shifted into trying to start capturing the energy that we had into some practical ideas. We used this framing that has come out of the Agile Labs down in University of Northern Alabama with some work that Kitty and I are familiar with strategic doing and their work. And this 4-quadrant model is one that has been used as a way of capturing the elements of creating a healthy ecosystem and creating the capacity for being able to grow and transform an ecosystem. And it has been the framing of a lot of our conversations in this group. And sometimes we've made explicit reference to it. Sometimes it's just been kind of implicitly hiding in the agenda. But it organizes things into 4 broad areas: brain power and talent, which is a lot of university programs, or excuse me, education programs, including both K-12 and university, but things that are developing people to their capacity and the talents that they may have and skills. And a quadrant related to innovation and entrepreneurship activities and supporting what's going on in that area. Having quality places where people can work and meet, and these include both virtual quality places like what we're doing now, but they also definitely come from creating quality physical places, whether it's co-working spaces, whether it's a walking mall or a park or something where people are coming together and they're getting a chance to meet and connect and do good work. And the thing to me that's important about this model is this 4th area, new narratives, because there's other work I've seen over the years that looks at those first 3 as kind of essential elements. But it was really seeing this focus on the new narratives that was added into this model that really was kind of my wake-up call with Alaska version 3 almost a year ago, realizing that we had no narrative about Alaska's future. And if we don't have a narrative about what Alaska's future could be, might be, that it's really hard to galvanize people's support, and we'll spend time dealing with how big should the PFD be rather than are we investing in the new enterprises, people, and opportunities in our state. So it's been really important that this new narrative be something we explore. Our writing contest has been a part of that. The work with the students was part of that, and other projects to me are all kind of helping explore how to build that narrative. So these 4 areas were ones that we used, and you'll now, coming up here, you'll see some slides or some pictures of what we developed in these areas. But I want you to see the map of the whole thing, with the understanding that the intent is, and we haven't done this step, of trying to see where those elements are that are closer to the center of this area, that leverage and have impact in all 4 of these areas as they develop, and help ensure that the level of effort and the impact is efficient. So in the brain power area, and I think these go around the circle. I'll have to go back. It doesn't matter right now. Brain power, we looked at a number of areas that would relate to how we support people and their capacity. You'll see mentorship. It may be hard to read, but it's where a lot of the dots are at over on the left. Showed up as a big issue. There was issues about training, apprenticeships, as well as some opportunities for education programs. Speakers are on there, and opportunities to build on our discussions in the past about building up youth and youth opportunities to be engaged in the work that we're doing. The next area was in innovation and entrepreneurship, and looked at programs that could be helping support more innovation and more entrepreneurial type efforts. And again, some dots that got thrown up there to not necessarily vote on things per se, but we were just looking to see where there was interest in there. The challenge pitch issue is one that had shown up both in the pre-survey as an area that people were interested in. The Alaska Innovation Coalition is a way to bring together people to talk about priorities, gaps, and needs within the ecosystem. But there's a lot of other issues related to being able to provide support for entrepreneurs. Many of the same things that have come up in this discussion with Laura's initiation of having a founders work group, Bradley's work, and looking at different forms of organizational structure, and the need to be able to provide more support for all those activities. The third area is the new narratives, and this is helping create some way of helping people think about what the future could be. The success stories was something a lot of people were attracted to be able to lift those up. It's certainly an issue that I continue to do frequently, trying to help people understand just how much is going on in our state that's so exciting in terms of the capacity that we have for new innovation and entrepreneurial effort, as well as just helping provide more vision and tools and support for what's happening in the future. The shared narrative area that was kind of a grouping down there was another way of capturing that idea about being able to share that with more people so that they could engage with that area. And then the fourth area, quality places. This one had both elements of looking at being able to have some virtual places as well as some physical places. So that upper right-hand area, again, I know it's probably hard to read depending upon your monitor, looked at things like studio space, prototyping space, fractional warehouse space, food, cold storage, place-based areas that would allow people to do creative entrepreneurial development type work physically, as well as there was a lot of discussion around the need for some virtual platforms or places that would allow us to collect and curate information around resources, people, and organizations to make them more available, more accessible to folks to be able to find those resources without having to search so blindly for what may already be out there if they knew where to look at this point. There's also an area in the middle here, kind of on the right, that's looking at a number of policy related issues that are related to the ecosystem. And that's an area where that one kind of dovetails a little bit with the new narrative. But in this case, we kept it into the quality places more as the need to create a forum to be able to work on those issues. So an issue, more about bringing people together to work on this stuff as opposed to the policy being created. Anybody who that was there or wants to comment on any of this stuff that I may have gone through quickly in those fair areas, or any of you that have questions about some of these things that are on there so far?
I mean, I just wanted to throw it out there. I mean, that's kind of what part of what my intention was with this planetary health zone. I mean, I'm literally creating a physical space with, tools and space and shop and all of that, as well as living space and shared office space and farming space. So that's literally one of the things that I've been attempting to do, and I'm still just attempting to figure out how to chop it up and bring it forward. And I'm just been slow hauling this forward because I didn't have much response from the community when I reached out in the previous times.
Mm-hmm.
So it all sounds good. I think that all of this sounds wonderful. Also I think that the cryptocurrency thing and the decentralization and the new business models and the new incentivized social tokens, all of these things are gonna really fit right into what we're talking, what you guys are talking about. So yeah.
Thanks. Other thoughts or questions?
Kai, I put a question into the chat. I didn't know if at the weekend, because it sounds like there's already a ton of resources within this group, at least from who I see that's here. I didn't know if there was discussion amongst you all around what institutions or organizations you already have trust kind of natively established with, and what incentives you all have to coordinate and align one another.
We didn't spend a lot of time in this weekend looking at that. I would say that from my perspective, that's been a pretty important part of what we did, more so in the first half of this year, where there was a big scan going on of where are all the places that this kind of discussion and this work could be. Because as we started off, the intent was this is something that we were all mutually interested in, but it seemed like that there was an existing place where this probably belonged and where the dialogue and discussion might find a good home. And so there was a scan to search around. And I think in the process of doing that, we also created a lot of connections and, ended up meeting a lot of really interesting people and organizations that had complementary interests and the potential of collaborating. And in some cases, there's still some discussions about, potentially, how we might work more closely together. So we didn't spend time on that this weekend, but I think it's implicit that to, I think, Kitty's point earlier in the meeting, that this idea of kind of helping guide the network of networks kind of discussion is really a pretty essential part of how we're trying to view what we're doing. This is more about network building and network guiding than it is necessarily taking on the whole world on our own. But how we manage that, I think, still remains to be seen. But I'm pretty, excited about seeing the diversity of the groups that are loosely affiliated with what we're doing and supportive of that. And yet, I think it's been really important to recognize that there's a bunch of groups that all are working on specific missions or outcomes that they're trying to achieve. And the discussions that we've had here have been more about how do we create an environment to move towards some common outcomes about creating the future Alaska, and recognizing that all these individual groups have specific areas of focus. And what we found out earlier this year was that they wanted to continue to focus in that area of outcome or focus that they had, and that we were really providing a fairly distinctive role in looking across all of that towards the future. So let me pause. I don't know if Kitty, if you've got a better way of describing that. It's been.
Am I? Yeah. I just have to echo what Guy said, and essentially that's what makes this to me so promising, is that even with only less than a dozen people showing up, I'm noticing like a really openness to what I call porous boundaries, POUROUS, I think, and boundary spanners, and folks who care passionately, whether it's a lot of you guys come from the entrepreneurial space, Margie, Mita, with the indigenous just transition work, that in particular, I see a real, and it came about through a lot of the dialogue over the weekend, and I've seen it here. It's like a willingness to stick with working across boundaries in service of a larger opportunity. And so I think we do want to think around how to really cultivate that. What are the incentives? What are the win-win-wins? And I will also add a little promo. Pascal shared Sunday morning, I think it was, the network of network mapping that he's begun doing, and just making it visible so that, we talked about this word resonance a lot.
Mm-hmm.
How do we help all these natural connections in our 1 degree of separation state and amazing things going on everywhere to do less duplication and less isolation and fractured work, and more resonance and harmonic value to the network as a whole, and that with a set of values that move us in a regenerative direction, which, by the way, Kai, I added the regenerative design principles to the last slide.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you both for that answer, because that really helps me understand kind of where it's been. And I've found some of the notes and the resources. I think what I'm noticing, and I'll just share this because it's sort of what I learned when I collaborated with the First Alaskans Institute on a racial equity project across the state, like a while ago. The process and how it's facilitated also makes a big difference. I think and I feel it. It's a great culture in this like chat. Like I definitely feel the vibes. It's a community that trusts one another and wants to collaborate. I think where I'm coming from and why I'm sharing this is that I'm at a point where I just understand the tools well enough and have my own resources and connections, and I'm wanting to start the conversation faster.
Mm-hmm.
So my trust is more immediate and accessible to different communities, and that's sort of what we use within the Andore project. I had more access to media people, so I would have the language to access them. And so when I was asking around if there was a sort of a list of organizations and institutions and people, it was to start to identify if maybe there was like a repository or a common sharing framework for information, because that's the other way we silo information, is just through knowledge and who knows what. And that's where I'm trying to build as much in the open as possible. It's really messy and it's chaotic. So I'm trying to fire hose it as well and learn how to organize it, which is what I'm trying to introduce to Kai, because it's definitely more of an artist brain thing to kind of thrive in that, but it's not the best for organization. But I'm trying to kind of find a balance in the two.
Yeah. Oscar, if I could hop in, one of the things that happened on Sunday, Pasquale put a little time in the evening after Saturday's discussion and started to create a physical map. It was if I say physical, it was on his computer. But he started to map out who are some organizations, how do they interconnect, and I keep seeing some of what we are doing as Alaska version 3 as helping to make explicit what those connections are and helping to facilitate those connections within the network. And so I have this image of my head of like the geographic map of Alaska, and then overlaid on top of that is the organizations that exist and the people in those places and what knowledge they have in their heads and the networks between them. And then, your work that you're doing with Solstice and how is value exchanged between these organizations? How can we collaborate? And I think that we are working towards a more explicit, faster transmission rate of knowledge, a faster diffusion of innovation around the network. And that's really exciting to me. So I'm looking forward to seeing like where this goes, how we can help bring this into reality.
Oscar, two things I wanted to just reflect on with what you said. One is that it's been one of the cornerstones of our approach to want to seek out and find connections into the arts and creative space. That's why, I think our first major project was doing a creative writing contest, because of wanting to explore that value, and why we've wanted to, as we talked with you in the last couple of months about finding new pathways for more multimedia or creative areas. But I do think that the path ahead is going to be greatly informed by the ability to bring in the artists and to engage them. It's an artist's nature to see the world in a unique new way and to find new expressions. And I think that's exactly the mindset that we need to have here. So, I don't know how that works. I just know that if we stick to traditional Western business strategic planning type of ways of thinking about the future, we won't get anywhere. At best, we will come up with a pretty report for the wall. But I don't think that's the right path for us. And so bringing in the arts is absolutely necessary. The other thing I want to just touch on is you mentioned the desire to accelerate the work you're doing. And I think we all share that interest in trying to find a way. But I would also suggest that one of the things that's most poignant to me, and I know came up with some of our discussions, is that we want to scale the impact of what we're doing and scale these discussions. So I think there's a synergy, maybe that's the wrong PC word to say, but I think accelerating is a piece of the puzzle. I think also scaling is an important aspect of what we're doing. So we could go really fast with a small group of people. I'm also interested in how we think about that with a broader number of people, so that, if we can influence 10 or 15% of Alaskans in the next couple of years to get that critical early adopter, we will begin to have the groundswell of people and energy in a new direction. So we need to find that 100,000 people in Alaska that are aware of this idea and narrative of what the future could be. But anyway, I appreciate that. And I think when I started talking, I felt like maybe there was somebody else was popping in. I'm not sure if the latency got on top of somebody. If you want to jump back in there.
No, that was great. I gotcha. And definitely hear you on the way I see it. It's actually sort of a brain exercise. It's integrating the left and the right brain. And what I've kind of learned to figure out is when I jump into projects or move into new facilities like this co-work space, I try to get a feel for how left brain oriented is versus right brain. And what a lot of and I'm a dad, so this is kind of like coming from my dad life. It's about whole brain thinking now. So we're taking the right side feeling, experiencing with the left side analyzing and logic. And you're right, pretty reports are just reports, but they could also be kind of reinterpreted in different ways. I think that is the role of the artist. I personally want to just challenge you all to be artists. That's why I'm here, and bring you down the rabbit hole, and you guys kind of help organize me, and then we just collaborate and then we make things. So that's kind of the way I see it. But yeah, absolutely. It's sort of a balance of these two worlds.
That's great. And, a concept that we could develop or, dive into further, but, really resonates with what you're talking about in this thread is the importance of developing a group and taking an approach that uses cognitive diversity in how we do the work. That is, recognizing the value in having groups that are made up with people that think differently, see the world differently. And it's not just diversity of skills and background, but cognitive diversity reaches into a deeper question of how people think and work, and creating an environment where people with a diverse cognitive background, feel welcome and are trusted, but also where we harness the value of those different perspectives and different ways of thinking about problems. So some great work coming out of, I think, Denmark on the power of cognitive diversity in building highly effective teams. That is a thread in the background of what's going on here.
I was just going to add, I wasn't unfortunately there on Sunday, but enjoyed the conversations on Friday and Saturday morning that I was a part of. But one thing that does occur to me in looking at this recap, the discussion, to my knowledge, hasn't taken place yet around cushioning the end of V2 for these at least tens of thousands of Alaskans that are going to be adversely affected by it. And I think that any serious discussion of this new economy, I overheard at the BP Center last year, two staffers talking, one of them crying about the end of the daycare center that was there. Hillcorp wasn't going to continue it families, people are suffering with the economic trajectories, on a family basis. And I know that we work at a higher level here and maybe a policy level, but I think for me, I would love to see a little more kind of down in the weeds about, what is it that's going to prevent acceptance of the V3 model? What are people afraid of? What are they losing? What do they need? Who do they have to connect with? And maybe what aspects of their lifestyle are going to have to change, and how can we help with that? So I know that's a lot of things, but
no, it's a super important one. I was flipping through the slides. I was trying to figure out where it was, because there's a piece of it that was caught in there, but although you've developed it a little more fully. But there's a recognition that there's a lot of the V2 that's kind of baked into our economy, and it's going to be hard to change. And we had talked briefly at some point about the 7I provision of the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. And 7I really forces this marriage between the native V2 world and the V1 world. And that 7I redistribution of income is a huge threat to every single village corporation around the state and regional corporation that survive only because of the resource revenue redistribution under the 7I provision. And so you're absolutely right, that if we don't understand how to cushion, to use your word there, but to how to see people move past, they'll be stuck, not able to see a path to this next economy when they see that change being so threatening. I mean, right now, it's fundamentally why we have to have new mines right now, and we have to open up Willow, and we have to do these things, because that is the only path that many of the Alaska Native corporations have to any economic future, because we haven't given them any other alternative. There's no new way for them to make money if there isn't a new mine. So anyway, so we're kind of at the end of the hour here. Next steps, we don't have this really baked out. I'll just share briefly that there are some pieces of this that have come out of where we were at the end of the day Saturday, and a discussion that we had on Sunday morning. Kitty also was collecting a list of what could we do, and who and when and whatnot on there, and we still need to distill that into something more concrete. So I kind of lament that there wasn't that brilliant lightning strike, aha, here's exactly what we're going to do next. I mean, the left brain side of my business world just wanted to have a tactical plan of go climb that mountain and do that, but it's still developing. But at any rate, there are some pieces that are out there. The quad model that we just went over, there's a lot of great content in there and ideas, and I think there's some work to be done in sifting those around, some more aggregation, trying to find some things towards that we can bring into the middle part of that model to figure out where there's some areas of focus that might have impact in multiple quadrants at the same time. We continue to need to develop a plan for our organization and how we work with partners in terms of the capacity to do work and have meetings and share informations, build out resources on a platform. There's a number of events that are coming up short term that are kind of next real steps that are happening, but it's also an opportunity in those events to be able to share a little bit more about this group, its intent. And I'm super thrilled with the retreat's ability to provide more information and context and processing that I hope will be really valuable in being able to present clearly, this idea of where Alaska could be, the promise and potential that we have in the different panels and discussions that are going on. So I've got basically 3 pretty significant events coming up, and that's going to be my focus for the next 2 weeks is working on that. I'll be putting out some asks to the group to look at some of those notes that I'll be preparing. I would love it if you could take some time to reflect on those or call up and chat about that along the way. There's some other opportunities that are kind of near term that we talked about that were, kept kind of bubbling up. We've been asked by the Anchorage Daily News to potentially take over writing a column once a week. I haven't fully committed to taking on that task, but it would be an opportunity to give us a lot of visibility And to bring visibility specifically, they're looking for a column about what's happening in the innovation, entrepreneurship, and this next economy area. And so give us an amazing platform really quickly to scale our discussion and engage people in that. So pretty exciting. There's potentially another co-working space here in Anchorage that may be available that we could be working on helping develop. I do think, though, there's a thread we need to explore in this, which is Elijah and what he's doing out in the valley with his space, what's going on with co-work RSD, what's happening with the boardroom. These spaces, I think, are part of a fabric. We need to think about how we build that and create access. I do think, though, that one of the pieces, like with potentially this space out in the east downtown Mountain View area, I would love to see a co-working space that's got a low barrier to more people coming and colliding and working. I love the RSD space, but this is high-end stuff that requires a credit card to show up in terms of it's class A, quality space there. At any rate, co-working is an area. We talked a lot about a Vista intern type of opportunities in there, more engagement programs. And in that is the question of, do we continue these Friday discussions? That issue keeps coming back. These are interesting discussions, but they're short with 1 hour. And we need to think about, do we continue these? Do we maybe have a different structure of periodically some social gatherings where we can chit chat like we do for a lot of this meeting, but maybe also have some more tactical business meetings or strategic planning meetings. The quad work I mentioned already, and then also this network mapping work that Pasquale's begun working on. So I know I left a bunch of things off the list, but those are just kind of top of my mind, just to kind of give you some feedback on things that we were percolating on when we were starting to wrap up on there. So Kitty, I think you said you put another slide in there. I don't see it there. So any other feedback or questions from anybody? I know we're at the witching hour here, but right now I'm transitioning, into getting ready for those 3 different activities that are coming up: startup week, startup weekend. But I'm going to be integrating the work that we've just gone over into trying to work on the messaging and what's not. But any other reflections, comments, or thoughts that you want to throw out?
I'm seeing Margie offer to convene a narrative follow-up sometime in November. I know that Startup Week is going to chew up at least one of the weeks there, but maybe after Startup Week, that's something that I could dive a little farther into.
I would
I think that narrative and common language is really important. I'd be interested.
Yeah, I would love to work on that. I was thinking this morning, Margie, as I was, thinking about this discussion about, as much as we've talked about how the future economy of Alaska is maybe a bit too opaque to try and decide we're going to be aviation or, some specific thing, I do think we can create a narrative roadmap that talks about the values and outcomes that we're creating. And I think it'd be a valuable discussion to have.
Yeah, and I'll just share that I'm in the process of convening like 4 different kind of focus groups around the narrative process that we've been working on. And so if we have the capacity to have that meeting sooner, it would shape the other meetings that I have.
Yeah. To Ryan's point, if we can somehow be maybe even framing the opportunity to do that work in a way that might invite people to be looking at all the activities that are going to happen in the next 2 weeks with a lens towards how does this inform a discussion that we'll have on the narrative? What do people take out of these different meetings? So if we're having a meeting about the startup ecosystem programs and the gaps there, inviting people to be thinking about this new narrative of what's there. If we have a meeting on Friday about all the Build Back Better grants and about all the projects on there, what does that teach us about the new narrative and the values and principles of how we'll do those, how we'll select which project to do? It'd be interesting if between, for the next couple of weeks, if we could somehow put that out there in a way that might invite people to be collecting and thinking in a way that will prepare them for that discussion that you're thinking about. It'd be
Yeah,
nice.
I feel like if I had like a work sesh with one or two of you all, we could probably hammer that out pretty quickly with what I've already developed.
That'd be great. I'd be open. I'll be around all week next week. I'm super involved, but my schedule is super flexible. I don't have a lot of meetings. I've just got a lot to do with the different events, but I've got lots of time to carve out whenever it's convenient for you if you want to throw something out there.
Yeah, I'll put some stuff in the chat here because Monday is usually my my most available day.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be a good day. Okay.
I just wanted to add one thing before we close up. I
Please.
just wanted to say that I'm having a little trouble figuring out what I need to keep my radar on. And the main thing I don't want to blow it on is startup weekend and week. And so I'm seeing a lot of emails. Sometimes I don't actually understand the emails very well. And I'm just trying to figure out if there's stuff happening maybe in the next week that I really need to be paying attention to.
In the next week, I don't think so.
It's this following. Okay,
It's the
that's all I
following
needed to
week.
know.
Yeah, I mean,
That'll give me time to read everything more thoroughly.
yeah, from my standpoint, startup weekend, I think, just stay focused in on the judging. Because I think
I don't really I'd love some help on that,
Yeah.
just to understand. I mean, do I jump into rooms or do I just wait to the end?
Yeah, well, it's mostly at the end. So there'll be an opportunity to do some work in the end, but I'd love to have you helping with some coaching and meeting with teams if they want any help earlier, but I don't want you to stress over that.
I'm happy to do both.
Okay, that's cool. So
I just don't know what to do.
Yeah,
I
we'll
can
have
judge.
we'll be reaching out to folks with more information on that. So
Okay.
it'll be
Great.
but yeah, nothing this week.
Thank you.
Anything else from anybody?
Kai,
Yes.
if you could pop just as a glimpse the last two slides, because these are I offered them on Saturday evening, Sunday as design principles, regenerative design principles.
Yeah, let me try. Maybe I need to stop the share and reshare or something because I'm not getting any more slides coming up right now.
And I wonder.
I see them now. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Margie, I wasn't sure that I got to share them with you, but these I feel like they really underpin the narrative potentially. And so I just wanted to offer those, and there's a link there if you want to dive in deeper. I'm still learning more about it myself from these people in Rhythm, but some, so a couple of design principles that regenerative development design attributes. So I wanted to offer that. Monday looks good, I've seen on the chat. And then the last thing, I drew pictures, I was listening, but as we go through the intensity of the next week, 2 weeks or 3 weeks, be thinking about ways we can keep getting inputs. As Margie said, like if we could get inputs now, it can really be built in. And I see it coming in 3 shapes. Like if we and I'm thinking about our website or something, a way of sort of harvesting and collecting from all of these impressions and access points, elements for the new narrative, art and artifacts that bring this vibrantly alive for folks, and then more connections on the networks of networks. So those are 3 buckets. And boy, if we could be using this intense period of outreach to just multiply the inputs on those, we can do, we can, I think, really move ahead with more diverse and rich inputs.
Last call for anybody?
Thanks, Kai.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining today.